Greetings. This is Len Gilbert, and thankfully I am still on YouTube. Free speech. It's something that's talked about a lot in this subculture, but rarely ever adhered to. I oftentimes hear the phrase, I believe in free speech, but blah, blah, blah. I don't really believe in free speech. I've been wanting to make a video about the case for free speech in the furry subculture for a while now, and I really, the thing that kind of pushed me into doing it was watching a recent interview by a YouTube popufur, kind of a centrist, neutral kind of guy, who goes by the name of Kotorix, and my friend Foxler. This interview was a disaster. It was one of the worst interviews I've ever heard. And I kind of put that on both sides. I don't think either party did a very good job. The one thing that really stood out was when Kotorix, who I guess I still don't mind him all that much, but he said to Foxler something like, I believe in free speech, but if I see any white nationalists or alt-right people on my Discord server, I'm going to get rid of them. People like that don't really believe in free speech. And I'd like to explain why. And I'd also like to explain why free speech is so important in this subculture, in any subculture, but in particular this one, and why the lack of free speech in this subculture is behind a lot of the problems that we're facing right now. Let's look at the furry subculture. Where are we right now? We're at the stage where artists are being blackmailed. Fursuiters are being ganged up on for having the wrong opinion on something as mundane as Medicaid. We're seeing, more than anything, people getting kicked out of Telegram groups, getting kicked out of regional meetups, getting kicked out of local groups for not having and not agreeing with the so-called correct opinions. We've even seen entire conventions shut down and bullied into submission. And we've even, of course, seen longtime popular comedians removed for saying jokes that offend a minority of people's sensibilities. This is what the subculture looks like when people don't stand up for free speech. What we have is a fandom of spineless liberals who didn't stand up to the leftist bullies. The effect is being felt across the entire fandom. So you can think that you're not really a part of it. You can think that it hasn't affected you, but is that really true? Because right now, even if you're not involved directly, you still have to watch every single word that you say online and at fur meets and at conventions. You always have to be looking over your shoulder to make sure that someone doesn't hear you say something that's quote-unquote bad, or that you don't misspeak something that someone might construe as bad. That's not very fun, is it? People such as Kotorix and others have enabled this environment and have brought it into fruition. And I don't mean to just pick on Kotorix here. Most people in this subculture don't believe in free speech. Most people in this subculture have acted like cowards and have rolled over, have gone along with the censorship. And I'm here to say that there is a better way. So what are we talking about when we talk about free speech? I'm talking about it here, obviously, by principle, not actual law. I'm not talking about legally with the actual First Amendment here, because we're all private citizens, right? I'm talking about it more in principle. And in principle, free speech was designed to protect unpopular political opinions before anything. Specifically and above all else, unpopular, controversial political opinions. And if you don't believe me, look at the treatises of and the writings of the founding fathers of the United States, or look at court case after court case after court case, you will see that this has been ratified many times. For the more intellectual among us, I want to give one example, just one, and that's James Madison. James Madison was basically the editor of the Bill of Rights, for those who don't know. In 1791, he wrote in the National Gazette, "Public opinion sets bounds to every government and is the real sovereign in every free one. But in a large republic such as the United States, it is, quote, less easy to be ascertained and less difficult to be counterfeited. Therefore," he said, "it was key to have a general intercourse of sentiments, which included roads and commerce, but also free press, and in particular, a circulation of newspapers through the entire body of the people." A more modern way of describing that would be to say, for the people to rule wisely, they have to be free to think and speak without fear of reprisal. And let me ask, is that how you feel in this subculture right now? Because that principle applies to this subculture just like it does everything else. Do you feel like you're able to think and speak without fear of reprisal? I don't. I certainly don't. I don't think anybody really does, if they're honest. I think another argument, and an argument against real free speech that I've heard from people in various places from the subculture on various platforms, is that we have to ban certain speech, that we have to prohibit, keep out certain speech that endorses or promotes hatred or vilification of people and genocide of people and blah blah blah. That's a very subjective terminology, though, and the big question is who gets to decide that, and who gets to decide. The big question is who gets to decide that, and what is and what isn't. Because there's a lot of arguments that could be made that a whole heck of a lot of speech on the left is promoting and giving the okay to genocide. Communism committed genocide against at least half a dozen different ethnic minorities within the Soviet Union. And there are furries that will openly say that they're Marxist-Leninists and openly put forward the hammer and sickle. How is that any different from someone who puts a swastika armband on? How is that any different? It's really not. It could be argued that it's not. And so I reject the whole premise of that argument. I reject the premise that speech needs to be restricted. I take the standard that I apply in things that I run is the standard set by Brandenburg v. Ohio, which was a court case where someone on a street corner in Ohio in the 60s, I think the guy was actually in the Ku Klux Klan. He advocated for the overthrow of the United States government, and he was arrested under the fighting words doctrine set by Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire. The court case was taken to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court decided that yes, advocating the overthrow of a government or advocating anything that's really extreme is protected by the First Amendment, is protected by free speech, so long as a person is not advocating and inciting violence in a concrete, specific, and believable way. I think those are the three terms set forth in Brandenburg v. Ohio, and it's the free speech principle that I follow. It's the standard that I set, and it's the standard I would like for other people to set as well, because I think it's a very good standard. For example, if someone on a platform, a hypothetical platform that I run, says, I think we should exterminate this, and that for this, and that reason, I don't delete it. Because it's not specific, it's not credible, and it's not imminent. But if someone were to say, hey, let's go start killing this and this group of people tomorrow morning, or sometime, let's meet in a street corner and beat up some black people or whatever, that I would delete. That would cross the line. that would be fighting words. That would be planning violence. And there's a fine line between political speech and opinion and violence. And it's something that I think is the Brandenburg v. Ohio case was super valuable in determining that. And it's the standard that I set for myself, as well as the standard I would hope that other people who actually believe in free speech would also set, because it's a pretty darn good standard. And we've seen what real free speech platforms in the furry subculture have created. We've seen the result and the fruition of some of that. For example, I guess the biggest and easiest manifestation for me to look at is the server that I ran. There were a lot of opinions on there, some of them ugly, and that was okay. That was okay. I would rather people vent their ugly opinions here in that server rather than have something where everyone has to watch over their every single word, like in the rest of this failing subculture. I'd much prefer option one. I'll take option one every time. But getting back to the example of my server, there were ugly opinions. But with those ugly opinions came a lot of debate. And if you look through the leaked chat logs, you'll see there was debate about this kind of stuff almost every single day. And that kind of debate really, it was debate that really doesn't much exist elsewhere in the fandom. That's the value of having a community that really practices free speech. On the other hand, there have been a large number of milquetoast wimps who were tired of being suffocated on other platforms and other groups within the fandom who came to my server and saw alt-right or white nationalist sentiments and demanded that I enact this exact same censorship on them that they got themselves. I will never, ever buckle to those requests. Ever. That doesn't mean that I agree with the sentiments that are being expressed. It just means that I won't censor them. If you have a problem with them, debate them or block them. That's how a civil platform is supposed to work. And I suppose I could have. There have been at least a dozen times people have said, why don't you get rid of these people? Why don't you get rid of these people? They're making you look bad. They're making the server look bad. It's not about. I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to deal with that bad image, and I could get rid of it. I could get rid of those people, and there would be some short-term benefits to that, right? Ugly opinions would be gone and out of the server, and that might improve our public image in the short term and the medium term. But in the long term, that platform would just become another boring, mediocre piece of this failed subculture, a subculture that is falling apart in slow motion. I prefer to have an alternative to that. I guess this is a promise to the rest of the furry subculture. I will never be a part of that. I will never, ever go along with that, because I myself have been persecuted and kicked out of things for the fiction stories that I write. And so for me to join in and be a part of that would be absolute hypocrisy on my end. Instead, I prefer to have an alternative to the smothering environment we have in this subculture right now. And I'd like for that alternative to be an example of real free speech and what real free speech can bring to fruition. Because in the long run, people are going to see that. They're going to see that example set, and they're going to come over, and in the long run, that alternative platform is going to win. Thanks for being with me again today. Long run, people are going to see that. They're going to see that example set, and they're going to come over, and in the long run, that alternative platform is going to win. Thanks for being with me again today.